Hi everyone, welcome back to part 2 of 3 of my fall sketchbook series. I hope you all had a great time doing part 1, and I am so excited to be showing you what we're painting today. We are going to be painting some pumpkins and mums, and these illustrations are actually really simple to do, so this video can be done probably under 30 minutes. So if you have just a little bit of spare time in your day and want to do something creative or productive, this is a great one to tackle. So if you haven't already, go ahead and check out my last video if you want to learn how to paint this middle row here. And let's go ahead and get started on today's painting and grab our paintbrushes. So like I said, for today's painting, we are doing pumpkins and mums, and these are going to be so much fun to paint. To me, these two elements really just signify the start of fall. I have mums on my front porch and love having pumpkins on my front porch as well. So we are going to do a larger pumpkin and a smaller one. And basically to start off, we are just doing a very light oval here. I just want to lay out the general shape before I start adding in more lines. And we're going to place a smaller one right here in front of it. So I'm just doing another oval shape here. So these are super easy. We're just doing these two oval shapes. And once we have them lightly drawn out, we are going to start adding in a little bit more of our details. So for the pumpkins, I like to have a little indent here at the top so that it's the base of where we're going to put our stem. And I'm just going to do a very light indent here. And then I'm going to just add a bit more definition at the bottom here. This is where we're going to start to see these oval lines going up and down between that indent and the bottom. And I don't want to be too stark with my drawing lines here. We're mostly going to be covering them with the watercolor, but usually you tend to see them a little bit through the watercolor, and that's okay. I actually love when you can kind of see the pencil lines through the watercolor. Some artists erase them, but I actually like to keep them. I think they just make it look more, I don't know, authentic. And so yeah, we're just going to leave those here. So once we are happy with the lines, I'm just going to go ahead and do a little bit of a stem right here. You don't want it to be too long, but all of our pumpkins are going to look slightly different. And I think that's the cool thing about pumpkins. They're all slightly different. No pumpkin is the exact same. So same thing for our smaller one over here. We're just going to turn our oval that we laid out here into a little bit more of a defined pumpkin. So again, we're just adding the up and down lines between the base of the stem and the bottom of the pumpkin. Super simple once you turn drawing into just little shapes, because that's really what everything is. They are just a bunch of little shapes put together. And I think that's really when I realized that you can draw anything, is when you just break it down. So I think that's good with our pumpkins. Let's go ahead and move on to drawing the mums before we paint either of them. And for the mums, I'm just gonna, again, break this down into little shapes. So I want the top of the flowers probably to end right about here. And we're gonna have it in like a little crate. So I'm just gonna have the bottom right about here maybe. So I'm going to make some straight lines from the bottom of the basket to where we're going to have the base of the leaves and flowers. And then we're going to have this like half circle at the bottom here. So again, super easy to sketch out. You can take your time with the sketch. If you need to pause the video to slow down and finish the sketch, you're welcome to do that. I definitely encourage you to take your time on the sketch. It always just helps when you're doing the painting to have a clear path of where you need to paint. So now for the flowers, I'm just doing quick squiggles here at the top. Don't need to be too particular with them. I do want to kind of mark out where we're going to have a bit of separation between greenery and the color of the mums, and we're going to do that right around here. We don't want all the flowers to be like red. We're going to want to be able to see some green in here. And so that's what I'm kind of just marking out a little bit. And then I'm just going to draw some lines in the basket just to lightly mark out where I want to put some of the light lines. And I'll lightly add those lines in here. So now that we have these two sketches done, let's go ahead and grab our paint and add that in. Let's start with the two pumpkins on the left. I'm going to have them different colors. So the one on the left, I'm going to have more of an orange tone, maybe a darker orange here. And I'm just adding in some brown, orange, and red to kind of get this nice deep tone. I'm going to start off with a lighter orange though. And then for the pumpkin on the right, I'm going to have it more of like a creamish color. So I'm just going to mix up the white, maybe a bit of purple in here. You can have your pumpkins whatever color you prefer. I just wanted to make sure they were different colors so that they can stand out. So let's go ahead and start with the pumpkin on the left. So we're just going to swipe some water over the entire pumpkin. And I am going to avoid the pumpkin on the right for now. So just the left pumpkin. Just adding a nice coat of water. This will help us use our wet on wet technique. Have colors blend in a little bit better. So now let's go ahead and swipe in some of this color. And I'm just going to do a nice light shade. I'm just kind of taking advantage of the sections that we have drawn out for the ovals. I'm leaving a little bit of white space on the edge just to have a little bit maybe of a highlight on there. And again, with the colors of the pumpkin, totally optional for whatever color you want to use. You can do like a orange pumpkin, you can do white. I'm actually gonna add a tad bit of green into it. I think some pumpkins have green on them, but I just like to have a blend of a lot of different colors, and so that's what I'm doing here on the right side. Just kind of putting in this other color. Then I'm just gonna add a bit more of a deep maroon or red color to our pumpkin. Just kind of taking advantage of the colors that are already on our palette. I like to just mix around what I've got. You know, naturally, when you're mixing a lot of different colors, kind of naturally makes them all go together. And I don't clean my palette a ton. I like to have the messy, already mixed together colors on there. Kind of makes it easier to just go ahead and grab what's already available. Okay, I'm going to do a tad bit more of a darker color in here, and then we're gonna let that dry for a second. I'm gonna do a little bit of like a blue color here at the bottom. So now I'm just taking the tip of my brush and just adding a bit more shadows into the creases of the pumpkin. Maybe a little bit more in the back of the pumpkin here that's going to be behind the stem. Just allows us to have a bit more of the darkness underneath the pumpkin and in the areas that would maybe be more covered in shadows. Take a little bit of the back area off. I got a little too dark back there, I think. I'm going to put that more orange on there. So now let's go ahead and do our lighter pumpkin over here. I'm just going to take our nice cream color and I'm just going to swipe over the entire area for this little pumpkin. And it's okay if your paint's still wet and the two pumpkins kind of mix a little bit here on the side. I actually kind of want them to mix up a little bit. And now we're going to just take maybe a little bit like of a purplish blue color. And then I'm just going to use this color to go in at the creases just like we did for the other pumpkin. Go ahead and put it up in that indent by where the stem will be to shape up the bottom of the pumpkin. Now I'm just going to add a tiny bit of brown in here as well, just to, oh, that's a little too much color. I'm just going to swipe that down. So just helps to, I just like having a variation of colors in here. So you can have it as much or as little variation as you'd like. Now I'm going to go ahead and let that dry for a second while I visit my other pumpkin to do the stem. I'm just going to mix up a brown color with a little bit of Payne's gray in here. A little bit of red maybe. And let's go ahead and just swipe upwards for our pumpkin stem. It doesn't have to be too straight of a line. In fact, I want it to be tilted. Usually pumpkin stems don't go straight up. Sometimes they do. But I want it to have a little bit of curve to it. This little pumpkin over here, we're just going to go right down to our indent right here. Now I'm going to take a dark blue color and just go on the edge of the stem here. Clean that up a little bit. I'm going to take this color and also go at the bottom of this pumpkin. I'm going to make sure that the left side is a little bit more defined. So now I'm happy with my pumpkin, so I might go back at the very end to take a small brush and define a little bit more on their stems. But let's go ahead and move on to our mums now. So now I'm going to start by just swiping over the entire area. We're going to do just a light wash over the whole area of the mums, and then we'll kind of go in with some more definition once it dries a bit. I'm going to start with the basket here. So I want it to be a light brown color. Yours can be whatever you'd like. I always like to have, more neutral colors mixed in with our nice fall colors. So that way we have a nice balance. So I just swipe that over very quickly. And I'm also going to go ahead and now add in a bit of our shadowing. So I just had a darker brown color with purple just to add to the edges of our basket here. While the paint's wet, I want it to mix in real nicely. I'm also going to define our lines that we drew in a bit more. Just like this, very nice and light. We want it to blend together really well, so that's why we're kind of working on this part quickly. Go upwards with some of my lines here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and move on to the flower area. I'm going to opt for more of like a maroon and red color. I want the mums to just really bring out the red in this painting, and so you can choose whatever color you'd like. I know I love the look of golden mums, so whatever you find will fit best for your painting. But once you have the color you'd like mixed up, go ahead and just drop that in nice and easy. We don't have to be too particular with where we're putting these flowers. I'm just making it pretty top heavy at first, which means I'm keeping more of the color towards the top. And we're gonna have some down here. And while that paint is wet right now, I'm gonna start adding in my green. And as you can see, I'm just working a little bit faster. So if you need to pause the video to stay on one area, you can definitely do that. We're just going to go over and add more definition once this dries a bit, but I love to take advantage of the wet on wet process while our paint is not quite dry yet. And watercolor, as you've probably noticed if you're practicing a lot, it dries quickly. So that's why we like to move fast here in the beginning. So now that we have a nice base layer, I'm just gonna revisit a few spots where I feel like need a little bit of work. I'd like to revisit maybe the basket area. I want to put a little bit more color here on the side. I'm just swiping that down. I want to make sure that we had some of the lines defined a little bit more. Not too much, but I just like to have the details to be shown just enough. Okay, so now I am going to take more of that maroon color. Go ahead and just add a bit more here around the top. Helps to have your circles be different sizes. So sometimes I'm taking the tip of my brush and I'm just like dotting to make really small flowers, and other times I'm using like the side of my brush to make some bigger flowers. Kind of just depends where you're trying to place them. And if you want a darker color, we're going to use less water, and I'm using more paint. So I'm going to take this nice deep blue here, and I'm just going to add to the bottom of some of these flowers just to give it a little bit more depth here. And I'm just tapping that in really lightly. You don't want to be too heavy with it. I just like to add a little bit of shadowing to like the bottom of flowers. Watercolor is the medium where you kind of have to, be a little bit more light-handed. It's always hard to take away the swipe of a paintbrush. Sometimes we have to be a little bit more careful in this medium. Now I'm just going to take some more green, and I want it a darker green. So I'm mixing up brown, green, and maybe some blue in here, just to get a nice deep color. I want to make sure that we can see some of the leaves maybe falling down in front of the basket here, maybe towards the sides a little bit. I'm just swiping upwards a little bit here so it looks like stems. Okay, I am happy with how those mums look. So I'm just gonna do one more thing on our pumpkin here on the left, and then we're gonna add a little bit of a shadow under these, and we'll call it a day. So I'm going to take a darker color. I just wanted to define this stem a little bit more here in the pumpkin. So starting to blend in a little bit. So I'm just adding in this very dark color right on the left side of the pumpkin. And that is basically what I needed to do. I just want to add a bit more detail here. Don't want it to go too crazy with the detail. Because I love like the soft look of watercolors. I don't like to add too many harsh lines in here, but I also want to make sure that we do have enough detail to know what it is. And the very last thing here in part 2 of the series is we're going to do the same thing we did to these 2 illustrations. We're going to go underneath the elements with a nice light color. I'm picking like a purplish color. I'm going to mix that with white, a little brown in here. And I'm just going to go right underneath these pumpkins just to add a little bit of a shadow here. Maybe a little bit here on the left side. Kind of just lifts them up off the page a little bit. And we're going to do the same thing over here for the mums, just underneath and maybe to the right side here, and just lifts it off the page just a tad bit. And we are all done with part 2. I hope you enjoyed painting these pumpkins and mums, and join me for part 3 next week. Those 2 paintings made me so happy to do. I think when you're doing a simple painting that is easy enough but turns out really pretty, it's just really satisfying to see the end result. So I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And if you haven't already, I'd love if you follow me on social media. You can find me at Emily Winslow Art. And I'd also love if you subscribe to my channel so you can be the first to watch the next part of the series, where we are going to be painting a pumpkin pie and some fall trees. So I hope to see you in that next video. Until we paint again next time.